Hello, I'm Rumali and I'm a international relations and political science student, and I'm going to be chatting with Professor Scott Lucas today, who is a professional journalist and professor of international politics in the Department of Political Science and International Studies. He runs the website EA Worldview, one of the leading international sites for analysis of the US, UK, the Middle East and Iran. Thank you for joining us today, Scott. So firstly, after that introduction, please tell us a bit more about EA Worldview.
Rumali, thank you for having me here. This is really exciting because I can talk to you about how what we do in the classroom at Birmingham and my academic research, we roll it out on a day-to-day basis. So as a journalist and as an activist, this website, EA Worldview, we created it in 2008, working with citizen journalists, working with other academics, working with other media outlets to get news from the ground. Now that's from the US and from the UK, but it's also from places like Syria, Iran, the wider Middle East, and we're expanding our coverage to take in other parts of the world. And the idea here is not that we say as academics, oh, this is the way that it is, but just as we learn in the classroom from our students, we learn from studying events on the ground, and then with all the benefits that social media bring, we actually write on a day-to-day basis to say, hey, let's pay attention to this and see if we can make progress on these key economic and social questions, not just where we live, but in other areas, from the Middle East to the United States.
Well, so how have you been coping with lockdown? Any reading or viewing that's got you through it?
In some ways, lockdown just reinforces what I tended to do on a day-to-day basis, in that every morning I start off doing a bit of work on academic topics that I would be discussing with students. But of course, I'm seeing what stories we've got that day. You know, before 9 a.m., we've got to cover the world by updating the website. But of course, what's happened here is that we're doing it at distance at times, is that you don't necessarily see people face to face. You definitely can't have these mass gatherings. So I think it's made me appreciate the fact that whether we're communicating face-to-face or whether we're communicating like we are right now, it's really important to appreciate the position that other people are in. There's a lot of shouting out there which says lockdown or no lockdown, a lot of shouting which says coronavirus was created by 5G networks. Not true, by the way, or that it's somebody's fault. And I think the important thing is that even in this virtual space, we realize that our daily lives have to continue, and that rather than having the disinformation and conspiracy theories, we just need to ask each other, hey, how are you doing today? And what can I learn from you that are going to make things just a bit better as we go forward, wherever this situation takes us?
Absolutely. I think it's that sense of community that hopefully this whole situation has kind of brought us together a bit. But thank you for that. So what do you miss the most about campus and the university?
I miss that sense of community that you get, that charge from being there. It's a great campus. You walk in and you've got the green heart and you've got that feeling of vibrancy and that things are moving forward. And I just miss that whether you're in the corridors or whether you're grabbing a coffee, as well as in the classroom, that there's always something of interest to be picked up, and that it's not, again, like someone's bringing it down from the mountaintop because I'm Professor so-and-so. I'm learning from students each and every day. And I think that word community you mentioned is really, really important, is that this crisis has made me realize how community matters. And it's brought us together in so many ways, for the National Health Service, for other people on the front line. But then thinking beyond this crisis, how can we make our communities better? And from the first day when I see the green heart, that's what I'm going to be hoping for on my return to university.
Absolutely. Hopefully it'll be a nice sunny day as well.
Exactly.
So your research areas cover current affairs, politics, history, and recently we have seen a series of protests and demonstrations against police brutality and racism in policing, which began in the United States due to the death of George Floyd. We've also seen provocative comments from President Trump and Candace Owens, as I'm sure you're aware, a Black conservative commentator, which is fueling the protest movement. So what impact do you think this has had on your research area?
Well, I think it's had an impact on research in that it reinforces for me that in politics and in history, it's not like the leader from the top that we necessarily should be paying attention to. So it's not necessarily Donald Trump's Twitter feed that's my political angle or history 30 years from now. Rather, it's those masses of people that came out, not just because they saw that murder of George Floyd in real time, but because of issues that have been around in my country and to an extent in Britain and around the world for many decades. In other words, rather than thinking that we sit back and wait for the next Trump tweet or prime minister's statement, if we're going to deal with equality and justice and deal with discrimination and deal with an economic future for everybody, it's incumbent on us to raise voices. But to raise voices, we've got to do it from a position of dialogue and understanding. That even if others are trying to inflame this situation, the more that we reach out and learn and listen as well as speak, the more we've got to hope. Look, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but we've got to hope we've got an opening to take advantage of to try to cross racial lines, cross class lines, cross gender lines, and say we're in this all together.
And do you think, what's inspired you to get into this area of research?
My research really shifted at the early years of the 21st century. I had been doing a lot of historical work on US and British foreign policy, mainly on events after World War II. But then we had the Iraq War of 2003. And it was at that point that I said that my research, it has to move to the here and now. What concerns people here and now? Because you had the Iraq War in 2003, and then you had, for example, the Iran protest of 2009, and then you had the so-called Arab Spring of 2011, across all those countries in the Middle East and North Africa. So that the issues of a better future aren't just American, they aren't just British, they concern all of us. And that's why my research shifted to try to study but learn what was happening. And at the time I was publishing books and articles academically, that's when EA Worldview started in November of 2008, which was, we call it a window on the world. And a window on the world is absolutely the fact that we have all these opportunities to see. We don't have to wait weeks or months to understand what people around the world, from Hong Kong to Venezuela to Ukraine, what they're concerned about. So let's take advantage of it. And let's not think of research as being, and I hate this phrase, the ivory tower. I prefer Old Joe, the tower at Birmingham, and the idea that we're not stuck away. We're part of something that is now truly global.
Oh, thank you so much for that. So you're obviously a very knowledgeable person. So do you have any advice on how I could shape my future at this stage of my university experience?
Well, channel that passion. Use your heart as well as your head. Never think that you have to wait for someone else to hand this to you. Your initial thoughts are valuable. So pursue them. Pursue them through dialogue. Reach out to people. Never be afraid to say, what do you think? What can we learn? And never, ever let anyone hold you back by saying, well, you know what? I'm the one who's in authority here. We're all in this together. And I hope a lot of us can be in this together at Birmingham very, very soon.
Thank you so much for very, very wise words. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It was really interesting to hear about your research area and the impact of the George Floyd protest. So take care, Scott. Thank you.
Real pleasure. Y'all be decent to each other.